Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good. You brought me in first again.
I did. Because we're doing that ace before beauty.
Yeah, I knew you'd like that.
Like, are we talking Ace Ventura? Is that what we're talking here?
Well, that's what my kids would say if you ask them, but I'm thinking more like Top Gun Ace.
Oh, I was thinking like Ace Frehley of Kiss.
Yeah, no, not me.
It's just so much fun to tease you. Honestly, it's like having the brother I never had.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, but at least I have a pseudo brother who's an ace, right?
That's right.
Any exciting plans for this weekend?
Just a lot of work around my house. Not the farm. Yeah. It's not the Jenni White farm, but still, I've got 5 kids that you could call semi-animals. So
all of them. It's like mine, not all of them.
Yeah.
There are a couple in there, that we don't know about, but yeah, I got to paint a sheep shed.
Well, I'm sure
that
sheep
should be
will
fun.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, they really care. So we have our rope regular on with us this morning. Our favorite representative, Sherrie Conley.
Yeah, and she is our favorite. I still remember the first time I met Sherrie in person. She was speaking at the Lion's Den, and she came in. She was talking about the books and just all the pornography, and I was just like, my God! I just wish more of our legislators would pay attention and be like Sherrie. I mean, how hard is it to just be on the right side of something? And I'll just Sherrie's speech was just so great, and I mean, I was just enamored with how passionate she was at the same time, and I just appreciate any time I get to talk to her.
Well, then you get to talk to her right now, so you'll appreciate that.
Well, yeah.
Good morning, Sherrie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm awesome. Thank you very much for that glowing, description.
Introduction.
Yes. Introduction.
Yes, that Michael is enamored of you, Sherrie. Yeah. Wow.
Well, I mean, normally you just don't see those legislators, talk about that kind of stuff. They're so scared to hit those subjects or push the wrong buttons, and Sherrie never is. I mean, she just tells you how it is.
Yeah.
Gets me in trouble sometimes.
Yeah.
But you know what?
We know how that feels, don't we?
Well, it's kind of one of those things where, I feel like I have been put where I'm at for a reason, to do a job. And if I don't do the job that I was sent there to do, then somebody else is going to get sent. And
Yeah.
so I have to do what I can do while I have the opportunity, and then just hope and pray that, when my time in the legislature is over, that I get to continue that work in another capacity, having been able to, make contacts and get to know people and just put myself in a position where God can continue to use me.
Well, I totally think that you're in that direction right now already. So that's a good thing. All right. So it's your show, Representative Conley. What would you like to talk about today?
So I want to talk about community schools, but I think I've said before, I'm kind of a how did we get here kind of person.
Yeah.
I like going back upstream and seeing where the dirt comes from. And then I also like going downstream to see where it's going to go. And so, whenever we first started hearing about community schools, I was kind of like, okay, well, I was still in that educator mode, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But I thought, okay, well, that doesn't sound like a bad idea until I started digging into it. And the more I hear, the more it really just, makes me go, no, we cannot continue this, especially, with the Biden administration doing what they're doing. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. If we were to get into a position where we were using what what those of us who want to help children, if we would use it for the good that it could do, then everything would be fine. But we've got people in the background doing things that are doing it for their benefit.
No, really?
That happens. Did you not know that? Well, I'm so glad I could let you know that today. So what I want to start with today.
I'll be quiet now.
No, it's okay. It's all right completely. So what I want to start with today is a quote. Okay. And where'd Michael go? So
he'll come back.
Okay. So the quote is, and I'll tell you where this comes from here in just a minute. Education reform isn't about what's right for students anymore. It's about what makes adults feel good about themselves, what gets them status.
Nuh-uh.
Really?
Read that one more time.
Education reform isn't about what's right for students anymore. It's about what makes adults feel good about themselves, what gets them status. So this is a quote from an ex-teacher from New York City. He retired. His name is Christopher Vasquez. It comes out of the book, Why Meadow Died. I'm going to quote a little bit. It's this book right here. Hang on. Let's see if I can get it.
Back it up a little, maybe.
Yeah.
No, in front of your face. Well, you've got that filter on to block out, and that's what it is. Let me look it up on Amazon, and I'll pull it in. Why Meadow Died?
Why Meadow Died by Andrew Pollack and Max Eden.
Okay.
So, so what happened was this quote came out of an interview that the people that wrote this book did with, they pulled it in, and lo and behold, I'm reading the book, actually listening to it on Audible, and they start talking about Oklahoma City. And so I'm like, okay, this is kind of crazy that they actually used some Oklahoma City interviews. Well, what they did was the NEA did some surveys on behavior in school. And I'm starting here. Follow me. Okay. We'll get there. Yes, that's it. That's it right there. So let me just tell you real quick about this book. This book, so Meadow was a 17-year-old senior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Broward County, Florida, when Nicholas Cruz came in and killed those 17 young people. So the book goes through and tells about the breakdown, and tells about Nicholas, tells about the events and the things that happened that caused a lot of the deaths, and caused this young man to just lose control and go in there and kill those young people. He would have been able to kill many, many more if the hurricane glass on the teacher's break room window would have broken, using his AR, and he would have been able to, kill a lot more people. But 17 is too many, right? Even
yeah.
One.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, this book was recommended to me because I was talking to James Lindsay, as a matter of fact, about discipline in schools and some of the problems, that we're having, that we're facing in the schools, unable to, it feels like, control the students anymore.
Yeah,
so
right. For sure.
So that caused me to do a deep dive into some of the policies that have come down from the U.S. Department of Education since the Obama era. And also Biden has picked up and carried on with those. And so they talk a lot. Yeah, they talk a lot about those policies in the book. I wanted to read a couple of these, and then we'll move on to the reason why I even talk about this in the first place in regards to community schools. So It says, so it gives this whole list of organizations that were upset about discipline. They want discipline reform, but this is what it says. Discipline reform is framed as an effort to combat racism. So it is politically incorrect and risky to criticize. Yeah. And so Betsy DeVos, she tried to do some work in this space in trying to actually help schools with school discipline. And when she did, she had all of these organizations. It was like this whole, like a page and a half of organizations that came out against the work that she was trying to do in her administration. Yeah. So then it goes on to say, it says, but in about a dozen school districts across the country, local teachers unions asked their members how they feel about these policies and found that teachers overwhelmingly oppose them. So they're talking about, moving out of the zero tolerance policies and into the, 3 strikes, 4 strikes, 5 strikes.
Yes. Or the no strikes at all.
Right. Social justice, the positive discipline, some of those other things that are just wreaking havoc on our schools right now because they're not working. It says, so it says that here's Oklahoma City. Teachers say these policies make them less safe. That was the question. That was the statement. And in Oklahoma City, 60% of teachers said that offending behavior had increased since the district adopted new so-called positive and restorative discipline policies. So it goes on and it talks about Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Portland, Oregon, Jackson, Mississippi, Denver, Colorado, Syracuse, New York, and all of them basically say the same thing, that those policies are not working. Then the next statement that teachers were responded to. Teachers say that these policies don't work. In Oklahoma City, 11% of teachers said that more progressive discipline would help them be effective in the classroom. So
how many percent?
11%. So this is 11% of the teachers were agreeing that they thought that the new positive and restorative practices were going to help. Only 11%, where 60% had already said that they don't work. Then the next one, teachers believe that traditional discipline works. And Oklahoma City, again, on the other hand, 65% of Oklahoma City teachers said that they needed greater enforcement of traditional discipline. So a vast majority of the teachers still wanted the traditional discipline policies. They wanted those back. So then it goes on to say, in 3 districts, unions have allowed teachers to comment anonymously on discipline policy. The same tragic themes appeared in each district. Principals refusing to manage misbehavior, turning a blind eye to violence, sweeping evidence under the rug, and even rationalizing and excusing death threats. So Oklahoma City, and then we'll move on here. Oklahoma City says, we were told that referrals would not require suspension unless there was blood.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I've heard the same exact thing from teachers myself.
Yeah. And it says, I would like to see, this is another comment, I would like to see a consequence for bad behavior or of some kind, such as when a male student pulls out his private parts and showed it to another girl and admitted he did so and nothing was done. So, teachers, and I'm sure that this is consistent all across the United States, not just Oklahoma, where administrators are, they're not enforcing traditional, discipline policies, and they're not requiring behavior in the classrooms. And so a lot of this comes down from federal policy, right? Are you familiar?
Yeah, but I think that's the case now. But Sherrie, honestly, so I quit in 2002. And before that, even I was having problems getting principals. I mean, I was the problem, not the parent, not the kid. Well, you shouldn't be doing this. So, I mean, already 5 years ago, we were already starting down that road.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do agree with that because, I started in the classroom in the early 90s, and, I started in not a rural, suburban area with, good kids, good parents. The majority of them, you could, call them and go, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Are you seeing this at home as well? And, the parents will either agree or disagree. And then you come up with some kind of a solution with the parent in order to solve the problem. Well, now, principals aren't calling. Now, let me not paint with a broad brush here, right, because some principals are still doing the right thing. But I think that the districts that you go into, the bigger they are, the more poverty there is, the more family challenges there are. I think it gets harder to deal with. Having been in Oklahoma City at Greystone Elementary, that was a very rough school. And you kind of had a mixed bag of parent support. You had some parents that were extremely supportive, and they were, they would say, well, I'm having the same problems at home. I don't know what to do. I don't have any resources, please help. And then you had others that were like, well, what did you do? Like what you said, what did you do? How did, what are you doing? What is the teacher doing to my kid? Mm-hmm. And they have no trust in the system. And, when you have a parent that goes through a system that they didn't trust because of the breakdown that had already taken place in a lot of the inner city schools, that's what you're going to get. They don't trust it because they didn't trust it when they went through. They know what it was like when they were there. And so, while they may not be doing everything that they're supposed to be doing at home, they also still don't trust, what's happening at school either. And so, we've got to do more about bringing our families back to the dinner table.
For sure.
Back into, having more of a moral and value-based worldview. Because right now, a lot of them are running amok. And I've got another book that I'm going to talk about, millennials, that, they are the largest. Do you realize that they are the largest group of the largest generation in history?
Really? Millennials are?
Yes. Isn't that incredible? 27 to 42-ish year olds right now.
Wow, really?
And you think about that a lot of them, their kids are the ones that are in junior high and high elementary school right now.
Right. Yeah.
The average age of millennial students, kids are 13. And so, that speaks volumes. And then when you go into the whole, the breakdown of the family and the breakdown of our morals and value system and the influence of the internet and some of the statistics about the things that millennials have encountered and the things that have shaped their viewpoint and their worldview has been absolutely astounding to me. So since we're talking about it, let me just go ahead and plug the book. You're probably not going to be able to see it. Oh yeah, Helping Millennials Thrive.
Okay.
And the author's name, he did the research, George Barna. You've probably heard.
It's a George Barna book.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And the things that he has come up with and the statistics that he puts in here, and then the connections that he makes to what is going on with millennials and the reason why they are the way they are. I think everyone in the world probably needs to read this, especially if you're still in the business world or, just engaging actually out there in the world. You probably need to read it because you come across millennials at every turn.
I have one myself.
Yeah. I mean, I have one, and then I have another one that is like right there on the edge. He's 25, but he's wise beyond his years, so he may be more like a millennial because his brother is more like a millennial. So, his brother's 31. My oldest is 31, so he's right there. So anyway, that was just very fascinating in, thinking about all of this and then hearing that research from this book. And I haven't finished it yet, but just having done some of the research so far and then listening to, some of the things that I've listened to, it's helped me to kind of put this together. So let's move on.
Sure.
You have any questions so far?
No.
Okay. What I did was I started thinking about, I listened to this woman. Her name is Sheila Matthews, and she has a group called Able Child. And her and her business partner have been doing research for 23 years. And when I heard her, she spoke about the Parkland shooting, which, kind of made my ears perk up because I'm reading about, Meadow and, what caused her death. And so then I started doing a deep dive into the research that her and her business partner have done. And it's all about the drugs that we're giving our young people. And so let me go back to Oklahoma City for just a minute. Well, when I worked in Oklahoma City public schools, we had a social worker that was on staff there from the Oklahoma Health Department. We had a counselor that was just, no, I don't want to use the word just. We had a counselor who was actually employed by the district.
Okay.
And they had stopped allowing counselors to come in from outside into the school because what we're finding, community schools, what they were opposed to was outside counseling agencies coming into the schools and billing Medicaid while they're seeing kids on school property.
Nuh-uh.
They had a problem with that. And so, but, and a lot of our students, especially in those inner city areas, they need that counseling for whatever is going on in their life. I truly believe that those kids need that counseling. And I felt like it was a mistake that they had shut the counselors out. Right. So, I want those students to get the help that they need. Fast forward, 5 years now, and we're having the conversation about community schools, and we're talking about putting mental-based healthcare, dental, optometry, all of these different counseling services we're talking about putting inside the school. And I will tell you that from my research, get a load of this, because a lot of people think that it's not happening very much. But $63 million this year has been granted for 5-year community school grants to Alaska, Arkansas, Louisiana, Maryland, New Mexico, Oklahoma.
Because it's in Tulsa.
Yeah. No, actually, it's in Stillwell.
Really? What happened to the one in Tulsa then? There was one in Tulsa.
Well, it's still there, but this is grants to start.
New ones.
Yes. And then also
in Stillwell.
Yeah. And then also in Puerto Rico. Okay. There are states that already have the grants. And listen to this list. Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, California, Pennsylvania, Utah, Texas, Iowa, Ohio, Connecticut, Maine, and Kentucky. 25 different states plus Puerto Rico have some sort of community school, building process that they're doing right now. Connecticut is a very interesting story because there is a district in Connecticut that said thanks but no thanks to the community school money. And that's what I want to bring Miss Matthews on for her to talk about what's happening in I think it's called Killingly, Connecticut. And so we'll talk about that all later with her. So I found it very interesting. They're calling it Capacity Building and Development Grant. And that's what Stillwell got. I think they've got, now Stillwell is known to be the largest community with Cherokee tribal students in it. Okay. And so I think that was one of the reasons why, they're pouring this money into it. I think it's like $2.4 million eventually. Their first initial money for the capacity building is $441,000.
Well, if you look back at the grants, basically it says that because I love this term, marginalized communities, right? Yep. So they want to help marginalized communities. So anywhere there's a higher Black population, anywhere there's a higher Hispanic population, anywhere there's a higher Native American population, it doesn't matter. They're going to force them in there, and it just hit me as I was saying that. Particularly in the Hispanic community, we do have a lot of immigrants here, and Oklahoma City Public Schools has said they're not even going to check if you're legal or not. They don't really care. They're just going to, go ahead and do whatever they need to do. So if you can legitimately get people who are coming into this country who don't really speak the language, you don't know anything at all about what the history of this country has been or anything else, and then you plop them down in the middle of this, hey, we're here to do everything for you. You don't need to do anything for yourself. We'll take care of all of it for you. What does that do to our society? What does it do?
Yeah. It just says, we're from the government. I'm here to help.
Yep.
So, on that vein, the schools that they're going into, the communities that they're going into, yes, are marginalized. They have less, their health outcomes are not as good and that sort of thing. But what do they all have in common? They are all Medicaid supported. The majority, 50%. Did you realize that 50% of our children across the nation are either on Medicaid or that CHIP program?
No, that's
50% of our students.
Sad.
And so you think about, they're going into these areas. Now, I totally understand this because I've been in those communities and I've worked with those families. And so I 100% agree that those families need, a hand up, not a handout, a hand up. And so I agree with taking care of, helping try to take care of those families and give those kids an opportunity to be successful. And
you mean through nonprofits, not through the government, though,
right? Yes. So in my conversations with teachers who, whenever I have been very vocal about being against the community school model and schools being able to file against kids Medicaid, right? So that's one of the things that's happening, even in the schools where there's not a health clinic in it. They are still filing Medicaid in order to give these kids supports. And one of the things that the Biden administration is doing, and this just happened like in August, that they have changed the parent permissions, and they're making it to where parents only have to give permission one time for them to access their Medicaid file. And so, and this is kind of where, I start getting, sounding like I'm looking downstream with this, right? Thinking about what Sheila Matthews has uncovered with the medicine and diagnosing our children with behavior problems, with ADHD and behavioral issues that we're now medicating for. Right?
Well, if you hook kids on medication, life-altering medication early enough.
Yeah.
What happens to them?
Psychotropic drugs, right? And so we have less discipline in the schools. And so when we have less discipline and we're not teaching children how to, self-actuate, regulate their behavior, thinking about what they're doing, and not working off of feelings, but working off of if I do this, what's going to happen to me?
Right.
But we have no
consequences.
We have no consequences. So there's not a reason for them to think, if I do this, what's going to happen to me?
Right.
What are they going to do? How am I going to get in trouble? There's no more of that. And so you've got kids that are out of control because they're not being given boundaries anymore, or they give boundaries, but then there's no consequence when they cross those boundaries. And one of the things that is so heartbreaking to me is that our educators are just as much victims in this as our students are.
Yeah, I agree.
And you've got teachers that are, they're going, when you say, you've got people up here that are trying to do things that are undermining your authority and undermining your ability to be able to teach. And then they defend those people because they haven't looked backstream, they haven't looked downstream. And that's the message that I really want to give, is to teachers to say, I'm not against you. I'm not against public school. What I am against is what is becoming of public school, because we've got so many tentacles into it, the social justice, which I agree that children of poverty, need to be, they need to be helped in a way in the classroom that gives them the opportunity to have an education, but not as a handout, but as teaching them how to truly advocate and think for themselves. And the same thing with parents. I want parents to be equipped. They already have the power if they would just take it and say, we don't want this in our school, or this is what we want to happen in our schools. They have that power. They're just not using it. And they're being undermined by people who a lot of them, they just don't understand what's happening. They have not, like I said, they haven't looked backstream. They haven't looked downstream. They're just not seeing what's coming. And so,
well, and I've got it. My daughter's 40. She's turning 40 on the 14th. And I remember, and she went to school in Edmond Public Schools. And I remember some of the things that she did. And so and that happened in her schools. And I think to myself, well, if they had already started this undermining of education all the way back to the millennials, which I know they did because my child was in public school at the time, then that's what the biggest problem is. I mean, think about it, Sherrie. If those kids were miseducated, undereducated, inappropriately educated, and now they're having kids, it's the same. They literally don't even know that they have parental rights, that they should be bringing up their child themselves with a teacher on the side, not the teacher bringing up the kid and them just checking in on the kid every once in a while. So, I think the problem is we're 40 years too far back. I mean, we're ahead, I guess.
Well, that's definitely why we're in that victim mentality now, Jenni. I mean, everyone is a victim. Everyone is so affected, and it goes back to, they're not being empowered and taught to think, when they're in school.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I don't even think the millennials really even realize, what has happened. And I, in all of my thinking about this, I started going back to, and I think I mentioned this before on your program, that we talked about all of the changes that happened in the 60s with removing corporate prayer, removing corporate, Bible reading, and then, the push for the conversations for sexual preference that started it got pushed out into the public square where it was no more, behind closed doors in somebody's bedroom. Now we're talking about it and being forced to, talk about it in the public square. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. So all of that happened in the 60s and then the early 70s. And you think about the birth control pill and legalized abortion and all of these things that have now broken down.
No fault divorce.
No fault divorce. Yes, exactly. That's the other one that I've got on the list. And think about what we were watching at the time. Okay. This was in the 60s and the 70s. I was born in 1963. And so, I was watching Leave It to Beaver, Andy Griffith, the Brady Bunch, and, all of these shows that were, very, there were value lessons in the stories, you learned from them. And it even came out of Hollywood, go figure. But I think that some of us, we grew up watching those shows thinking this is the way life is. And, many of us, we lived in 2-parent families and, divorce wasn't so prominent as it is now. And so we grew up with the mentality that this is the way the world is. All the while you had people who were in Washington, D.C. that were breaking down the very fabric of our society for years to come. I mean, you didn't start seeing the repercussions of what happened in the 60s and early 70s until, getting into the 80s and such. Yeah. And so now we're looking back and we're going, what happened to our country? And we raised our children in such a way with the mentality about Leave It to Beaver. We still did family dinners. Yeah. I mean, we still did all that. We didn't have soccer and football games on Sundays during church. And, we didn't miss church
or Wednesday nights.
Or Wednesday night. And we still had church on Wednesday nights. We still had church on Sunday nights for that matter. Mm. And so I think that those of us that have millennial children, we raised them in such a way that we had a mindset of what we thought America looked like, which put rose-colored glasses on us. And many of us didn't realize what was happening in our society until it hit us upside the head. Now it's mowed us over, and now we're going, oh crap, how do we take this back?
Right.
And so anyway, you can tell I've been thinking a lot about this, and I put a lot of deep thought and contemplation and research into thinking about what's going on in our society, because I want to understand what's happening in our schools now. And I think I'm getting there. A lot of us are getting there. So the connection, there's a triangle there, right? We have school-based mental health services that the community schools are wanting to bring in. And when you do that, and then you have the changes to the rules to access Medicaid, and you've got the breakdown in behaviors, and you've got teachers that refer kids that have these breakdown in behaviors to the mental health services. Mental health services says, oh, well, this child either has behavior disorders or they have ADHD or whatever that they can medicate for. Then they start medicating our kids. Then those kids that are medicated, and we've already seen this in some of our mass school shootings, like Parkland, that was one of the big factors in that shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in Broward County. And there's that connection between the breakdown in behavior and discipline in schools, the medicating of these kids, because they haven't been they haven't been taught how to behave through one way or the other. And then, of course, you've got, like with Nicholas Cruz, who's the shooter at Parkland. He was in foster care. The mom couldn't control him, but she also very much coddled him. And, we see a lot of the coddling of those behaviors as well. And it creates this huge gap, and it allows people to think that the community school is the way to go. And like I said, I could see the benefit in bringing some of those services into the school and allowing parents to have and kids to have that access to that. But then when you start realizing that all they're not doing behavior modification, they're just giving them a pill, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got the issue, let's talk about transgenderism a little bit. You've got kids that, and one of the things that you see in schools, and this, Jenni, is that you've got kids who are violent and have behavior, control issues. And then you've got the kids that are silent and they are depressed and they are anxious. And so you've got two different sides. And what are they doing? They're medicating both of them. And when you send kids, and I believe you've had TSS Smith on your show, and she talks about sending your kids into the behavior system, and those kids go in with anxiety and depression, and they come out having been told that anxiety and depression is because they're transgender.
Right.
Yeah. And so you've got these two groups of kids that are on Medicaid, being told either they need drugs for behavior or they need drugs for depression and anxiety and transgenderism. And so we're creating a generation of kids who are going to be completely dependent upon the pharmacy industry. And we've seen them be completely invasive into our world. I mean, everything that you see, we can't even watch a football game because sponsored by Pfizer, news channels sponsored by Pfizer, TV shows sponsored by Pfizer. And so everything that's getting fed into us through mainstream media and mainstream television, which I'm not a partaker. I don't watch any of that, but we've got so many people they're getting fed a narrative, and it's all from Big Pharma. So there's my tie. I'm tying it all together. And it blows my mind, to think that it is the Big Pharma and the healthcare cabal that could be pushing every single bit of this. It's not about, it's like that quote that I read at the beginning. It's not about helping kids anymore. And that makes me just completely angry and sad.
I agree 100%, Sherrie. And, pharma's in bed with government. I mean, basically they're teaching these kids at that level also that they are dependent. So as they go through their life, they're always going to be dependent, not just on pharmaceuticals, but they're always going to have that victim. They're always going to be dependent on government. They're always going to be in need of welfare or service or social services or something, instead of just empowering them. I can't stand that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the things when, well, Julia and I found out about this community school. There was a community schools bill last year by Dwayne Pemberton in the Senate and Tammy West in the House. And we read it, and I looked at it because, you know, anytime you see community anything, you should run the other direction, because it is Marxist, absolutely Marxist at its core. Because you've got to remember, Marxism is we're supposed to all be a community, because we can't be individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Once they get rid of the individual, then we become sheep. And that's the whole idea between community anything and individualistic anything. We need to be individuals. That's who God made us to be. But the Marxists always want to create community, and they always want a community effort, because that's how they educate people into, that's how they propagandize people into doing anything that they want to, right? I mean, that's how it works. So Julie and I put together some research on community schools and how far back it went, and that it did go back, you know, in fact, to the socialist movement. And I showed how that happened. And then we talked to some various senators at the time, because we chose to kind of fight it in the Senate side. We talked to some senators at the time, and Jake Merrick was still in the Senate there. And we talked to him and gave him our information. And he actually saw what we were talking about. And we talked to Dwayne Pemberton himself, because he was the one that ran the bill. So we went and talked to him. And he said, well, you know, girls, I'm going to go to Tulsa and look at this community schools building, and I'll see for myself. But I think you're, you know, I don't think you've got anything here. I think you're just blowing this all out of proportion, you know, but I'm going to go to this community school in Tulsa, and I'm going to, you know, I'll see what this is like, and we can talk about it later. Well, in the meantime, the bill came up into the Senate Education Committee. So we put together just a one-pager that talked about what community schools were, what their history was, why we shouldn't have them in Oklahoma, and why we certainly shouldn't be spending people's tax dollars on them or enabling them at the state level. And so we sent that out. So if you don't mind, can I play this? It's a 7-minute snippet of the Education Committee. And let me just say this. So right before this part happened, that I'm getting ready to share with you right now, right before this part happened, Carrie Hicks, who is a Democrat, Carrie Hicks basically came out and said, I love this. This is a great thing. You know, I love the model that you're using, this hope model, whatever, I don't remember what it was, but it's Governor Stitt's wife's initiative, mental health initiative. And they had worked that mental health initiative into the bill, into this community schools bill. So this is taking up right after Senator Hicks had just lauded this behavioral program that was being, and still is being, pushed by Governor Stitt's wife. So this takes up where right after that.
Will there be additional debate? Senator Merrick, you are recognized for debate. I appreciate the concept and concern for the holistic approach towards the children. I'm all in favor of this model, but more so as an approach more appropriate for private schools. I feel like this is drifting away from the requirements for government-funded schools, and I believe that as we do so, we're opening the door more and more for opportunities to infiltrate the learning system that we're actually trying to read out.
Sorry, that's my bird.
So I feel like we're opening that door more broad, open it more opening it more widely for more and more things to come in that are outside the purview of government-funded schools. So for that reason, I'll be a no on this morning.
Will there be additional debate? Seeing no additional debate, Senator Pemberton, care to close?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. I know several of you have got emails here the last day or so, probably a dozen or so, or half a dozen, that would try to push this as a model that's supporting left-wing ideology.
What? Oh, hang on a second.
I will tell you one thing. When I went to the schools to visit, I did not find Karl Marx hiding behind the hedges. I did not see it in the classroom. I did not see it in the hallways. I didn't see it among the kids. Matter of fact, what I saw was wraparound services and love and giving kids opportunities they didn't have. I think these schools really come into play in communities that have high poverty, that are Title I schools. Matter of fact, I think Union has 8 of them, and all 8 of them are Title I schools. They're using those funds to find those services. Over 50% of the students in the elementary that I was in are below the poverty level. About 50% of them speak English as a second language. These are kids that are behind the ball to start with. And most of them don't have health services. So what Union's been able to do is bring a healthcare provider.
What were you saying?
Onto their property. They built the healthcare facility on Union Public Schools property. They have a dentist because these kids do not have dental coverage. They have 4 mental health workers that work in the school. They provide students all the things that they need. And it's not the school that's decided to do this. If you look on page 2, under number 2, the comprehensive need assessment process that includes all the stakeholders, from word go, parents are the number one engagement. They came in and they brought parents in, they surveyed them. They didn't just send surveys out. Having been an administrator, if you send surveys out, you may get 10 back. What they did is they brought the parents into the school site, and they did that by doing projects, activities, and providing food. That's one of the things I learned a long time ago in school business. I can send out overhaul the curriculum, parents up here, get 10 show up. If I said we're having barbecue tonight, I have 200 show up.
Okay, I'm going to quit doing that because I didn't realize it was so bad. I was actually recording it off of my computer at the time, and I didn't realize that all of that was going on. And so later I went back and I recorded it inside my bathroom. I closed the door and recorded it in there so I didn't have all of that noise. But I mean, I think you heard the bottom line there. I mean, he basically... I mean, to me, he throws 2 citizens under the bus for actually doing research and then sending it out and sending it around. And well, some of you have gotten these emails that say that this is Marxist, blah, blah, blah. Well, I didn't see Karl Marx hiding behind the bushes. What an ignorant thing to say. And besides ignorant, it's just ugly. Sorry, Senator Pemberton. It's ugly and ignorant.
Well, and oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I just couldn't even believe he said that. I was absolutely kind of like, wow, that you might as well just get up, come out, walk behind the desk and just slap us in the face, and it would basically do the same thing. And so he's not even he's not even taking the time to think about what we might be saying, but then he's echoing exactly what we're saying. So it's like, yes, every service is here, and yes, we're providing all of these. So he's saying exactly what I'm saying, but he's not calling it Marxism. Because he doesn't even know what it means.
Because ultimately what you've done is you've put all these services in the school and you've taken the parental process out. Now it's the school deciding when the student needs to go see the optometrist, when the school decides when they need to go to the dentist. And maybe they are getting parental permission to send the student to the dentist, but it's still the school making the decision that the student needs to go. And who's to say that at some point, because they're already doing this out in California and some of the other, heavily blue states, that if you don't agree to send your child to those services, then they report you to DHS and they take your kid from you. And so we're not far from that. And so let me just tell you a couple of the thoughts that I had while he was talking. So, he says, I didn't see Karl Marx hiding behind a bush. Well, no, you're not going to, because the people in those schools are doing the work for the right reasons. They're there for the kids. They love the kids. And in their mind, they're doing the right thing, not realizing that, okay, you put the community, it's kind of one of those things where I can't think of a good analogy at the moment. Oh, yeah. It's kind of like putting a trap out there for a bear trap, right? Or a trap to catch a skunk or whatever. You put them out there in the hopes and in the knowing that eventually that animal is going to come along and it's going to get caught in your trap, right? Follow me. So you put it out there knowing it's going to happen. So you put the community school together and you put all these services there in the knowledge that parents are going to take advantage of it, right? And then you've got people like the Biden administration who come along, and the Obama administration and the Clintons, who were, I'm sure, had some hand in this, because it started in this started in the 70s. This didn't just start 5 years ago. And so you create the community schools, and then you come along behind, the federal government comes along behind and starts changing the policies that allow the schools to push parents out, and it happens, and the schools don't even realize what's happening. Like, I had a teacher quote to me. She said, well, it's hard to get permission from the parents to treat the child. And if you have to get permission every time you have to treat them, let's just think speech pathologist, okay, for one. So if you have to get permission every time, well, you may have a hard time getting permission from that parent. So you get permission one time, and then you can treat that child through the school year. Well, it's going to be the same thing for mental health. You get permission from them one time, and they can send them to the mental health people every time. And I mean, it almost feels like they put all these other things in there to say, see, we're helping kids. But I mean, that mental health piece, that's the one that just gets me. I've got a huge problem with, dentistry and ophthalmology is one thing, but you start talking about a kid's psyche, and we're talking about something completely different. So I'm thinking about the people that are in those places. They're not doing that, thinking, turning it into a socialist school. They're doing it because that's where their heart is. They don't understand what's happening behind the scenes. Changes to the mission of the school are being changed as the policies from the federal government come down. And so they may do it for one reason, thinking we're going to help kids. And then the next thing you know, it's out of control, and the school is now running the child's life, and the parent has no say-so in it. And that's that looking downstream to what's coming just by looking at federal policy that's coming out. They've already removed, and they say that they've removed permissions. Yeah. They say that they've removed permissions only from students with IEPs, but that's not what the policy says. The policy is removing permissions for all children, not just the ones with disabilities. And so we are headed off the cliff with this unless and until people start paying attention to what's coming from, the federal level and what they're going to do with it downstream.
Well, and that's why I pulled this in. So this was for the 4 pillars of America's education takeover from the Obama administration. Remember, he had No Child Left Behind, but his was Race to the Top. We'll give you money to do these things. Mm-hmm. And the big one right here, the state longitudinal database, that's, so when we did our look at this data sharing that's going on, I mean, look at all this. This comes from the local school district to the State Department of Education, to the National Center for Educational Statistics, to the Institute of Educational Sciences, and then a whole bunch of other government organizations. I went through Food and Nutrition, Department of Corrections, Census, Complete College America, Administration for Children and Families, all of these things. So when you have a community school and you've said you were only going to get permission once because it's just too hard to do that, look at all of where this mental health data is going.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me say something real quick, Jenni. During who was speaking? Was it Pemberton? You said
Pemberton.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Put your little slide back up there. I want to mention something that you probably didn't pick up on during his speech. He said that this was I can't think of the exact phrase, the sentence that he said, but he basically said this is for the stakeholders.
Yes.
You know, I mean, when you look at stakeholder in this situation, these are the stakeholders right here on this screen. These are the people with a vested interest, not the parent's interest, not the child's interest. They have a vested interest in controlling the information, the money, whatever it is. I mean, he used that word, maybe not even, he didn't even realize, but I think he probably did. But the word stakeholder, you know, that's this whole new thing where you got stakeholder capitalism and all this stuff, and you remove your sovereignty from all these businesses, your privacy, all these things, and it's kind of the greater good for these other groups and these other entities that have our best interests supposedly, you know, but they have a vested, I mean, that's the actual definition. It's a vested interest from these types of entities. And he said it exactly in that little spot that you played.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's the other piece to the puzzle, you know, there is, I really do believe, because what is data? I mean, Sherrie, if I know everything about you, I can control you. I guarantee I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, that takes me back to my last point again, that parents are cut out of the process. They're cut out of rearing their children because all of these other groups are making the decisions for them and just making a suggestion. Well, I think your kid needs to go see this. I think your kid needs to go see that. And, you know, I just want to encourage parents. And, you know, let me just say this real quick, that whenever I started down this path and started doing the digging and realized, you know, just like that slide right there, there's so many tentacles and so many people have their, have their fingers in this process. And my mind was swimming in all of the acronyms and all of the different agencies that have a say-so and all of the money that's going to all of those different organizations by the federal government in order to either gather the data, provide the platform to gather the data, to disseminate the data, to report on the data, and then to come up with a plan to put the data in place. And so, I mean, you're just that's 5 different fingers right there. And that doesn't even scratch the surface. When I started looking through all of these different, like I said, all of these different agencies and organizations and associations that have a say-so in the education of our children, and it's taking it away from the parents. The parents are, and they don't realize it, and the teachers don't realize it, and the administrators don't realize it, and the only ones that really realize it are the ones that wake up one day and go, "Wait a minute,
what?
Yeah, what is happening?"
Well, you know, we had Gabe Woolley on. Gabe Woolley is a teacher in the Tulsa area, and we had Gabe Woolley on, I don't know, Michael, what, a month ago, I guess now. And he was talking about the fact that the nonprofits, we talk all the time, our superintendent, I'm going to get the woke out of schools, right? But we have nonprofits in every school that we've allowed to come in that bring in the most heinous garbagey garbage, particularly in Tulsa with the sex ed. And they have these why? How? I'm going to ask you as a representative, how is it that we can spend public dollars on a nonprofit that has no board to whom the taxpayers are responsible, or vice versa, actually? The board is not responsive or responsible to taxpayers, and yet we're dealing with these nonprofits and we're bringing them in, we're allowing them all these kids' data. This is getting to be ridiculous, and it's sad but true that our current superintendent isn't stopping this. We have a nonprofit, Merit, now that's supposed to be coming in to manage between parents and schools for the tax credit. We've got that. We have a nonprofit that's coming in for that's supposed to be coming in to help with tutoring for kids. We have got to stop doing this, because these are vendors, and there are people, these vendors aren't doing this for free, they are saying, here, have this for a couple of years for free. Well, Google did that when Janet Barisi first brought Google into the schools. Oh, well, no, this is free. Well, why? Because they were making gazillions of dollars off of the data they were collecting on these kids.
Yeah.
We've got to stop.
We do. And that's just more of that not looking downstream to see, the reasons why these people are doing this. And so, and I go back to the idea of nonprofits. And, when nonprofits first started, that was people like you and me donate to nonprofits in order to do the work. It's kind of like donating to a church. Used to, that was the whole thing, that you donated to your church, and the church did certain things with the money, and then you donated to nonprofits, and the nonprofits did the work, that needed to be done outside of government organizations. Well, now what's happening is that really nonprofits, if they're taking grant money from the federal government or from states that is likely coming from the federal government, or is coming from these large donors, like,
you mean like Walton Foundation or AFP, or
well, and I go, also to Amazon and the Gates Foundation,
Google,
and Clinton Foundation, and all of these that are not in it for the good of humanity. They say they are, but they've got ulterior motives, and it doesn't take much research to figure out what those motives are. And so they say one thing, but they're actually, doing it for another reason. And that just makes me sad. So that's what's happening with our nonprofits that used to, we gave to nonprofits so that they could do the work, and we volunteered with nonprofits so that the good work could be done. Right. But now those nonprofits are taking money from the federal government. And when you have administrations like Obama, Clinton, and now the Biden administration, those come with strings that people don't realize what those strings are unless they are doing the digging. And then, like, I sit on the board of a nonprofit. One of the things that I do all the time is I say, when the executive director talks about applying for this grant or that, and I'm like, okay, what kind of strings are attached to that money? What are you going to have to do? Are you going to have to teach this? Are you going to have to talk about that? And I just, I ask those questions because I'm not going to support the application for a grant that has strings attached to it that is going to be counter to what parents are going to want for their children, because the nonprofit actually supports children and supports families. They're doing great work. They're one of the ones that are doing really good work. And but that's, I vet it. And I've made the comment that, I'm not going to be able to stay on the board if this ever changes, and if the executive director if she and I weren't in alignment with our thoughts, that sort of thing, then, I wouldn't be able to stay on that board. But anyway, that's what's happening. I think that we have lost sight of that because they're not nonprofits anymore. They're NGOs, right? It's an organization that's taking government money, and they're not being supported by regular people anymore.
Well, but there's not even, and the other flip side to that is there's no accountability, there's no transparency, there's no clawing back or anything by taxpayers. And that's why it's not just a Democrat thing with the Clinton Foundation. I mean, you have all of these so-called, conservative organizations like AFP or Walton or whoever it is that end up coming in and providing money for programs then that the taxpayer has no ability to do anything about. They're completely outside of our purview, and yet they're getting government funding, or the government is paying for them. And this is honestly, I think it's really one of the steps in one world government, because all you're doing is you're mixing private and government together. And once you've mixed them together well enough, you get a homogeneous mixture of government and private. And now what do we have? Government. Because the private's never at this point in time going to exceed government, because government is now overgrown its bounds to the point where there are more people that are employed by the government than are employed by private industry. So if that's the case, who owns us?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah. And the more often that they put the little guys out of business, which that's exactly what it feels like they're doing.
Well, of course.
Which is a whole nother conversation in and of itself.
No, but I mean, that's another reason why because we could go down the tax credit road. I mean, that's why Michael and I can't stand tax credits, because all you're doing is elevating one industry over another. And that's not a level playing field. And that's not what we ever said we were going to do with free market economics in America. So we've just started picking winners and losers. Well, now what are we? Well, we're not a free market economy. I mean, we're definitely not that.
Truly, the way it needs to be handled is that, if you want taxpayers to be able to use their money to send their kids to private schools, then we stop taxing them. We say,
what? Oh, Sherrie, you can't be serious. We can't do that.
I know. And I just look at it, and it's not a popular thing to say, but we need to look at our property tax. We need to look at the different ways that we are financing the things that we do, just like the justice system. We're charging the people who've been charged with crimes. They're having to pay all these fines and fees that go to things that have nothing to do with the criminal justice system at all. And
that's an excellent point. You're exactly right about that.
Yeah. And again, that is a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But, that lends it to, if I find this person guilty of a crime that they're not, that they've been charged with, but they're really not guilty, then they're paying those fines and fees. But then you have the opposite, where you've got some of the DAs that are not doing their due diligence. It's kind of just like what's happening in the schools. People are not being held accountable for their crimes. And that was one of the things that I used to tell my students about their behavior in school. It was like, you're breaking rules here at school. When you get out of school and you go into the world and you break rules, guess where you end up? You end up in jail. And you almost can't even say that anymore, because that's not even it's not even happening.
No, because who ends up in jail? People like the people who walked into a public Capitol building on January 6th and then went to prison. So I mean, it's Yeah, it's just gotten so far out of control. What do you think we can do about community schools? Because we're going to have to close up in just a little bit. What do you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Because there was a bill run this year about community schools as well.
Yeah.
So it seems to me like they're really making this considered effort to get the state involved. And right now they already have federal dollars. Like you said, they already have private organizations flooding them with money to influence, the minds of children. So, really, what does it matter at this point if the state doesn't get involved, I guess? I mean,
well, no, we need to continue pushing back on codifying community schools in state law, because, like you said, obviously they're able to do this because they're doing it in Tulsa, now in Stillwell, and even the State Department of Education a couple of years in a row under Joy Hoffmeister took money for community school organization and what was the term I used? Like infrastructure type thing. So, we need to keep pushing back. We need to keep this out of state law. We need to not codify this, because then once you codify it, then every school thinks that they are going to have to do it. And then, the more demand, I think, that we're seeing, it looks like from what I could tell with the Biden administration, that the more schools that they have applying for these grants, the more money they're going to continue to put into it.
Right.
And, if they're wanting to control the mental health of our children, we're already seeing that through, again, I'm not going to use a blanket or a paintbrush here to talk about SEL. Not all SEL is bad, but the majority of it is. And so, they're pushing kids to think through feelings rather than logic. And then we're, putting these mental health care organizations inside the schools, and we're just exacerbating the problem. So we've got to keep the community schools out of being codified so that schools don't think that they have to do it. And just, continue to allow those districts like Union up in Tulsa, who have said, we're going to turn our district into a community schools district. Let them do it on their dollar, but the parents are going to have to push back. And that, we've talked about that before, competition, that competition piece. And when you educate parents to the problems, then parents are going to have to do their due diligence, and they're going to have to start pushing back and either pull their kids out or start going to school board meetings. And then, of course, going to school board meetings and running for school board and taking over those school boards to stop this. And again, I'm not going to villainize school board members, because not all of them are villains. They are just unsuspecting victims in this, just like the teachers and the administrators are. Our job is going to have to be to educate administrators, educate teachers, educate parents, and get them to see, downstream, to look downstream at all policy and all rules making and the things that come along with it, to start thinking, what can they use this for? How can they use this against me as a parent? How can they use this against my children? And how can they use this against us as a society?
Well, let me ask you a quick thing before you leave here today. Michael has been shut out of having lunch with his student, and I'll let you talk more about that in a second here, Michael. But I spoke to somebody yesterday who was talking about a man that she knows. This is a small area around the Tri-City areas on the west side of Oklahoma City, who has a granddaughter who is in one of the schools there. And he tried to go visit her, and they basically shut him out, and he wasn't allowed to come in. But before they shuffled him out, he said he walked into the classroom, and there was a line of desks that along one wall, kind of out a ways, that didn't have any chairs behind them. And he asked about what was going on there. And that was the inclusive part of their classroom, where this teacher was allowing students who believed that they're animals to go to either use the bathroom as in a litter box or to hide as in they had a doghouse. So why do you suppose parents are being locked out of schools? And here's my second question. If you prevent me from seeing my child in a publicly owned building, is that not kidnapping? Is it not kidnapping? This is publicly owned building. You have my child. You won't let me see my child. I don't see how that's not kidnapping. And how are we allowing schools to kidnap children from their parents or grandparents?
Sounds a lot like what happened to our loved ones in their long-term care facilities and in the hospitals too, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Well, first of all, I would probably get an attorney because if they're keeping you from coming into the school, I mean, do they have policies that say, is it just you? Is it all parents that they're doing this to?
No, it's at least in our case, it's kind of almost this is in Edmond Public Schools. There's not a board policy and there's not necessarily a district policy. They revert back to the site administrator and the site handbook. And the site administrators that I've talked to, a couple of them, and I've had parents from other elementary schools who say the same thing. The site administrator basically says, for security and safety, we've moved to where the parents are not allowed to come in for lunch anymore. Well, if you want to check your child out, you can, but you can't come in here for anything like that anymore. And they just blame it on, since Uvalde, it's their responsibility, because I was actually told by the site administrator that there's parents that they don't want, in the cafeteria with other kids because they may say something or try to discipline, or do something that, that they don't want them doing.
So they're stopping everyone from coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I told them, I said, hey, I gave them a plethora of different options. I said, we could have a sign-up sheet to where only so many parents are vetted, ahead of time that are allowed to come in. I mean, I said, I said, who we are, exactly who all of us are. And I said, there's ways to get around this. But in my case, what they did is at my son's elementary school, they went ahead and purchased a picnic table and then put it out front. So if you want to have lunch with your child, you come check your kid out and you eat lunch at that picnic table out in front of the school, and then you take them back in when you're done. And I said, well, that's kind of defeats the purpose. I said, the purpose is to be a role model, to go in, to show these kids that an adult will take time out of their day to come have lunch with the kids in their environment, in their place. She wanted nothing to do with any of that.
So are they having parents come in and volunteer for book fairs?
Yeah. She told me, she goes, if you want to have access inside the school, you can volunteer. I said, okay. I said, so the only way that I get access to my child is if it's beneficial for you, whether I come in and be, just a security guy for that day, or I come in and do work for the school. I said, so that's the only way I get access.
So are they allowing parents to come in and shop at the book fair with their kids?
I don't know. I don't know about that. Probably.
Need to ask, because if they are, they're discriminating. I mean, allowing them to come in.
There you go, Michael.
Yeah. Well,
if you're allowing parents in to come do something other than sit in the lunchroom and eat lunch, then you're discriminating. I mean, every other access, do they get to come in and watch programs?
Yeah.
They get to come in for award ceremonies?
Yeah, those are excellent points, actually, Sherrie, because I hadn't, even when Michael and I have talked about this before, I hadn't thought about those either. But that is, I mean, you could hit them with discrimination. But I think the problem too, though, Sherrie, is I think it's such a widespread problem. I mean, there are hardly anybody that we've talked to that haven't had the same problems, that schools are just, since COVID, they've just decided that the schools are theirs. They don't need to, they don't need to let anybody in because they're ours, and we'll just lock you out. And, I think it's concerning too, because if this grandpa who was talking about this situation in this girl's classroom and nobody's able to find out about that because no parent can come in. So you're telling me literally then that things are happening in classrooms that some teachers don't want parents to know about. And I think we should, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. These are taxpayer funded buildings. They're completely public buildings. You can't stop somebody from going on there. And while I do understand that it's not like it used to be when I was a kid and you'd have both ends of the hall doors open and people would just come in and out. I get that we don't live there anymore. I'm not a moron. I get that.
Yeah.
But there's got to be a better way of doing this. And what we're doing right now is kidnapping children, and that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I go back to, not wanting to paint with a broad brush. But what's happening is that we're saying we want to keep kids safe. I appreciate that. I so much appreciate that after reading this book, Why Meadow Died, and, digging into some of the school safety issues and school shootings and things. I appreciate keeping kids safe. But what is happening is that because they're shutting parents out, it allows for these situations like what's happening with what this grandfather saw in that classroom. And then, of course, I don't know if you saw the pictures from the Bixby Library Scholastic Book Fair. Did you see those on my Facebook page?
I did not. I must have missed that.
Yeah. So go look at those pictures from the Bixby Scholastic Book Fair. And, when you stop allowing parents to come in, then you're able to hide some of these things that some of these teachers and administrators are doing. And again, no broad brush, no paintbrush, no blanket here. But, those incidents are being covered up by people trying to do the right thing, but they're stopping the eyes from getting on situations that, the principal can't be everywhere at one time. Right. And so, if they don't want those things happening, but they are, and you're shutting parents out too in the process, Michael, I know you to be a level-headed man. You're going to, if you see something, what do they tell us? If you see something, say something, right?
Yeah. Get them back with it.
Let's use their words against them. And so, okay, so this is what I saw. I don't agree with this. Why are you allowing this to happen in the school? Please help me understand why you think this is okay. And then from there, then we as the consumers of our programs that are set up by our state tax dollars can have that opportunity to go, you know what? I don't want my tax dollars used in this way. And then that's when, we have to start going to school board meetings. But people are so busy and people are afraid of getting canceled, and they're afraid of getting labeled a racist, because that's what is used. Every time you do something that their agenda doesn't agree with, they label you as a racist, even if what you're doing.
Or homophobe or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And
fill in the blank.
So you've got people who are afraid. We've got to stop being afraid.
Right.
They're only going to be able to cancel us in their community, right? You're not going to get canceled in our community. The people who agree with us, the people who believe the way we believe, and who have that value, moral, worldview. And of course, mine is a biblical worldview, but not everybody has a biblical worldview. But they seem to have some morals and values, but those are even going out the window. And that's a whole nother story too. So,
right.
Anyway, I just think, I think that we've got to go back to the parents and just tell them, listen, you have the authority, you have the power. You've got to wield it. You've got to speak up, and you've got to say, this is not what I want. And if it's not what you want and they are not going to listen, then you've got to take your kids and go someplace else. Just like I said in the last podcast.
Well, and that's a good place to stop too, because you're exactly right. But I think that's got to be all of our messages moving on into the next year is we're Reclaim Oklahoma Parent Empowerment for a reason. We've got to get parents to reclaim their empowerment and understand that they are their children are their sole responsibility.
Yeah.
Nobody else's.
Yep.
Just theirs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
stop
Sherrie,
expecting somebody else to raise your children.
Yeah, that's right. And we could even go back to the Bible, right? Bring a child up in the way they shall go, and they shall never depart from it.
Yep.
But that means you as the parent, not somebody else.
Not expecting somebody else to do it.
We are not going to see you again until January, because we are going to take a break on our podcast through the holidays, because we are all very family-centered people, and the holidays are a great time to spend with family. So we will not be together during that time, but you will be back live on the 12th of January.
January 12th. All right.
January 12th.
I'll get it on my schedule.
And we will be rerunning some of our old, podcasts while we're on vacay. My daughter says vacay. But then we'll be back. On the 12th. So I can't wait to find out are you still thinking you're going to keep going with community schools, or are you just going to see what hits you?
Well, I'm going to continue down the path, because I believe there's so much more research there. And I know that there are some people on my Facebook page that have actually done a lot of that research. And so I'm hoping that they will share it with me, because I'd like to put together this big picture of the research that everybody's done, because, just like Sheila, that I'm going to talk to her, and I want to talk to you about, I'll just share her information with you so that you can get with her and get her on the show. And I'd love to be a guest, listening, maybe I'll just watch, while she's on, because, I think she has some information that we all need to hear.
Well, maybe we could do that on the 12th when you come back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That'd be good. I like it.
Because that's the very first week we're back.
Okay. Yeah. And we can definitely do that. So, anyway, yeah, I don't know what I was going with that.
Well, on that topic, then I guess we will all say goodbye, and we will say goodbye for now, Sherrie, and you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday.
Yes.
And we will see you when you get back. And we still have a couple of weeks yet to fill out. Michael and I do. And, but we will definitely see you after the holidays, and yes, send me that information.
Okay.
And, we will go from there.
Michael, I hope I helped.
Yeah, you did. I'll get started on that.
Fantastic. Yeah. In the meantime, I'm gonna look up, some case law that not case law, but some statutes that might support some of that as well. We've got to get that figured out for sure.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, Michael, you have a good weekend.
All right. You too, Jenni. Hey, I was going to say two things real quick. Sherrie, you were talking about growing up and watching Leave It to Beaver and all these things, but there was something working in the background. Well, you know what started back, and I looked this up right after you kind of mentioned that, but something that started right at that time frame, 1966, was Cloward and Piven. And I don't know if you're very familiar with that whole. It's a massively democratic. It's kind of the installation of the welfare state, but it was a whole political ideology. But that kind of started, in government, at that level back then, and the entire strategy has come to fruition. Jenni's probably pretty familiar with it.
Yeah, it's called Cloward Cloward, Cloward, Piven, Piven, and they were two professors, I think at Southern California University.
Yeah,
Wasn't that where
I
they
can't
were?
remember where they were.
SoCal, I think. And they came up with this strategy basically to flip government into a socialist model.
Yeah.
And
the
it's
installation of the welfare
fascinating.
state.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then something else, just one other thing I looked this up too while we were talking. 24 million government employees, Jenny. That's how many government employees there are. 24 million. And I looked up the Medicaid
just
stats.
a few.
Yeah, there's 86 million Medicaid, or over 86 million, but like 86 million Medicaid recipients. I mean, that's a quarter of our entire population on Medicaid.
Well, but we were only going to do that for a little bit.
Yeah.
And you said 20, how many government employees?
About 24 million.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that just goes to show. I mean, the bigger the government gets, the more of them there are, the more of them that are dependent upon the government for their livelihood in one way or the other. And so,
well, and it's an inverse, right? So the bigger the government, the smaller the liberty, the individual liberty, right?
Yep.
So,
for sure.
Well, that gives us something to think on for the weekend.
Yeah. Thank you for looking those stats up for me.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. You didn't even know that was on my agenda to look for that.
Hey, happy to do it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to look up this Cloward and Piven.
Piven.
It's happened. It's been installed.
Yep. Well,
the interesting thing about Cloward Piven, and I'll just say this before I go because this is good information, actually. So one of their strategies, because it was a whole big strategy. I mean, they wrote a whole book on it.
Yeah.
But one of their strategies involved public meetings. And they realized that government was having these public meetings, and that, I mean, even elected officials would have town halls. And they realized that the way that they could not only change what the person was having the meeting, their frame of mind, but they could change the frame of mind of the entire population sitting in this meeting, was they had a strategy where they would put specific members that they had already clued in, and they would sit in various places in the theater or in the audience so that they didn't look like they were in a group. Because that would mean, consensus. That would be weird because it would just be a group. So they would scatter them all over the meeting hall, and then they would give them talking points. And so whoever was, running the meeting would go, oh, there's a comment over there. Oh, and then there's a comment over there. Oh, well, there's a comment back there. So it made it appear as though there were a lot more people in that room that were against his strategy or for it or whatever it was. And so they would literally move the needle on sometimes policy just by doing that specific thing, because elected leaders would fall for it and think that there was a much bigger group that was for it or against whatever policy they were talking about. And that was that. And it seems like a nothing, but that's one way that Cloward Piven really, just moved a whole bunch of things left and into further government control, was by operating that in public meetings.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So there you go. We learned something different. And now we are going to actually exit here since we're a little over for today.
Okay.
But thank you everybody for tuning in. We had a really nice audience on Rumble this morning. So thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate you being with us. And Sherrie and Michael and I will see you again all together on Friday, January 12th. So please make sure to mark that on your calendars and come back. And then Michael and I will see you again next week with V1 SUT, and Carmen Greider will be on with us for next week. So please make sure you in, and lovely to see you as always, Sherrie.
Yes, it's good to be here. Good to
And
see you
great
all.
to see you.
Yeah.
What?
It's good to see you all.
Good. And so thank you again for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good holiday.
All right. You too.